Welcome to Two Angry Men, the newest podcast with Los Angeles Magazine's own Mark Geragos and TMZ's Harvey Levin, where the two get together and talk about the biggest legal stories of the day. Enjoy.
So the judge ruled Diddy could wear street clothes in court. What he wears is important because the defense is arguing Diddy led a swingers lifestyle, not a criminal lifestyle. And if you put him in a cardigan sweater like the Brady Bunch, it doesn't work. Welcome to the Two Angry Men podcast. I'm Harvey Levin.
I'm Mark Geragos, and do you remember the old expression "waiting for Godot"?
Yeah, I do indeed.
Okay, I'm gonna update it to "waiting for Levin." How often do I have to sit here waiting for you to show up? And I love the fact that you've got Weil kind of warming your seat. I mean, it takes a village to raise Harvey Levin. You ever notice that?
That is so rich from the man I literally can never track down, and you know it, who I call 10 times for each single return phone call. I was a grand total of 1 minute late after you moved this up 15 minutes from what you wanted, and I wanted an hour from now, and you're saying that seriously?
Well, you know
Are
why
you
I
serious
want to push
about
back
this?
here? Yes, because
Oh my
by the way,
God.
I don't know if people know that the way that you've kept your longevity intact.
Would you stop with
Under my theory, is your bedtime is about the same as a 2-year-old toddler.
Okay, well,
What do
that
you go to bed
I-
at 7 o'clock?
Yeah, I cop to that.
Yes, and I don't go to bed at 7 o'clock. I'm not.
What does
I
it
am
have to do with
AARP.
daylight when you never return phone calls?
Because I actually have a day job, and you
What,
apparently.
can I ask, what do you think I do? Because honestly, we're going to talk about Diddy in a minute, but
Yes,
we got to
yes.
we just got to have a showdown on this.
I
You call
agree.
me,
I
call
agree.
me like I am sitting having lunch. I'm running a business.
You-
We have 3
okay,
television
you-
shows. We have documentaries. We have 3 websites. We have a bus tour. We have all sorts of business issues.
When
What
I
do
see
you think I
when
do?
I see you driving
my
the bus,
God.
when I see you driving the bus,
I'm
or
actually serious. This
sitting
is
down and editing,
ridiculous.
then I'll succumb
This
to
is, you know what? I am not.
You're not engaging, of
I'm not
course,
engaging.
because you've got a bus tour. I'd love to talk to whoever runs the bus tour, how often they talk
First
to you
of all,
about
the
running
bus
of it.
tour, I was talking about it this morning, Mark, okay?
Oh, you were
this
talking
morning.
about it. What? Were you out there
With the-
mapping out the routes?
I don't
as to
drive
who
the
house it goes
bus,
by?
Mark.
Yeah,
Jesus.
well, I've talked to some of your assistants, as you know, and they give me a completely different
Yeah,
perspective.
Anakin gives you a different perspective of me. Let's stop this.
Yeah.
Let's stop this for a minute, okay?
Okay.
Uh,
Yes.
okay,
Well,
so
we
Diddy-
can continue.
Diddy-
We'll continue this off the air.
We
I'm
will.
happy to
Believe
do
me.
that.
Believe me, we will. Okay. Diddy starts
Yeah.
Monday. And
It does.
And jury selection starts Monday. And now we know what the teams on the prosecution and defense side are comprised of, which I really want to get into, especially the prosecution, an all-female prosecution. Really interesting. But before we do, jury selection in this case seems almost impossible. It's going to be a 2-month trial. So a lot of people are out just because of that, because of hardship.
By the way, 2-month trial during the summer.
During the summer.
I mean, I pick juries during the summer. Prepaid vacations, kids out of school. It's a nightmare.
So that. There's also a fear factor that people are so scared of, being in high-profile cases, and especially if they vote against the way they feel the public believes. So there is a fear factor to that. And then there is a bias factor that I've seen over the years and you've seen over the years. And, finding people, look, everybody's probably got an opinion, or most people do. It's can they shed that opinion and listen to the evidence? And it just seems when you add up all those things, it's going to be really hard to find people.
You know what? You hit on a really good point that I often hear made, which is everybody's going to have heard about this case. And I think you have to actually be from New York to understand just how pervasive Diddy is in New York in terms of people feeling like they know him. Knowing about him or the case, though, does not automatically disqualify you. I mean,
Right,
you often
of
hear
course.
people
O.J.
talk about
O.J. Simpson.
Exactly. exactly the example I was going to give. That doesn't disqualify you. You're not looking for somebody, the court's not going to kick somebody off just because you've heard about the case.
In some
It's
ways,
the
in some ways,
second.
in some ways, you don't want somebody so in the dark that they're just not connected to what's going on.
You're absolutely right. You know, Jerry Spence and I talked about this many, many years ago, where Spence said he actually prefers somebody who says, I've heard about it, I think he's probably guilty, and after that. And I used to say, why? And he says, because I think that that person is being more honest than the person who says, oh, I may have heard about it, but I've got no opinion whatsoever, and I really haven't engaged on it, which a lot of times is the hallmark of a stealth juror.
And
somebody
and
who's
and
lying
and
to get
when
on.
jurors are questioned in that respect, to me, it's not if you say to somebody, could you be open when you listen to the evidence and change the view you tentatively have? And they always say yes. You don't believe that.
No,
What you
no.
say is roundabout. You say, have you ever had something that you really believed in strongly and you actually changed your opinion? Can you give me an example of that? Those are the people you want.
Yeah, and by the way, the one of the fallbacks when either the prosecutor, if you will, or sometimes the defense will do this as well, to rehabilitate a juror. When a juror says, yeah, I've heard about it, I've made up my mind, or I've heard about it and I lean towards one side or the other, you say, but can you follow the law? I've always thought that's a little simplistic. And the reason for that is they don't know the law. They don't know what the judge is going to say. I mean, obviously, you can talk about the platitude. Can you set this aside and presume somebody is not guilty? It's one of the reasons I always think attorney voir dire is better than court voir dire, in the sense that the attorneys know their case better. The attorneys, the judge who's in there and who may be up to speed on all of the issues, still doesn't know what the hot button issues are. The lawyers know that. And I always think that attorney voir dire is better than court voir dire, but that's having said that, it's very rare in federal court.
Well, speaking of things the jury knows about, or prospective jurors, wow. The Cassie video is coming into evidence in this case. And that opens up
but
a
not,
whole.
yeah, but not the CNN version.
I know.
They're right. Okay.
But
and your point remains. I mean, that's true, whether it's the cell phone or what the other.
I got to tell you, we did a Diddy documentary. We did 4 of them for Tubi, but the last one we did, we assembled a mock jury and we actually showed them the evidence on both sides. They deliberated, and there were 4 out of the 12 who felt Cassie video, even though it wasn't what he was being tried for, was the beginning, middle, and end for them.
Look, I couldn't agree more. And you give the prosecution props. It's a prosecution by proxy, so to speak. And what do I mean by that? You show that video, and I think you said 4 out of 12. I'd almost estimate.
Well, those are who cop to it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's the old expression: 90% admitted, and the other 10% are lying. But they've taken that video. They, meaning the prosecution, they've recast it. They've said, no, this isn't about domestic violence. This isn't about whatever was going on between the two of them. What it is you look at this to see the kind of coercive effect or the kind of control that he had over Cassie, and that you can now believe that he would be a violent person. It really, to my mind, is character assassination. I mean, I don't think they're going to run away from the fact that Sean has, I mean, I've known Sean for a long time. He has a violent temper. And especially, I think, when you combine it with kind of the drug use. But that isn't what he's charged with. As you said, how do you get over that when the jurors may shut down once they've seen the video?
Yeah. Do you know is there a material difference between the CNN video and the video the prosecutors have?
Yes, I do. I do actually know that.
What's the difference?
Clearly what has happened in the CNN video, which if you take a look at some of the filings, so I'm not talking about anything that's not in the public filings. In the public filings, it appears that not only has CNN destroyed what they got as the original, but it's not in sequence, meaning it was spliced and it was put through some various iterations on the editing software, which to me, and you and I discussed this maybe a month ago, 2 months ago, should have kept it out. And it actually, and remember, people, if you kind of look at the comments down below the podcast, people were saying that's ridiculous, that's ridiculous. By the way, the prosecution is the one who conceded that they're not putting in the CNN version. This is not the CNN version.
How does it change? How does it change the case for the prosecution or the defense based on the original?
I think that the defense has said in some of the bail hearings and has alluded to in some of the filings that fight between Cassie and Sean was not over anything sexual related. I think it changes it dramatically.
Over a cell phone.
Exactly. You got it. I mean, and you take a look at this, you slow it down, you take a look, and you're going to see that. And that really casts a different, I think, perspective on what was going on there. Look, nobody's justifying the hitting or the striking or the violence, but the fact remains the prosecution's the one who wants to reinterpret what that video is. They're the ones who are saying this is about sex or freak-offs or wild king nights, whatever you want to call what was going on in the privacy of their own bedroom. And the defense is going to say, no, 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 that's not what it's about. Have you ever had a situation where your significant other took your cell phone? And does that take you from 0 to 60 really quick?
So I want to see if I understand this properly. So it came out this week that the prosecution offered the defense a plea bargain, which the defense rejected. My understanding of this, and I have a feeling you're going to correct me, but I'm going to try based on what I think I know, is that it's not uncommon. In fact, it's common for prosecutors to offer a plea deal, and it's not so much that they want to avoid trial. It's that if the defense doesn't actually come forward and ask for one, and the client gets convicted, one of the arguments on appeal is, well, my lawyer was incompetent because he should have asked for a plea deal and didn't get one. And that prosecutors often offer it, and they're not really offering any kind of a great deal. It's basically, what they would get if they would have been convicted. But it kind of covers themselves just to make sure that the case doesn't get reversed. Do I at all have that right?
I'm the first to criticize you when you're wrong, and I'll be the first to applaud you when you're right. I interpreted this as a prophylactic measure in order to insulate if there's a conviction, an ineffective assistance of counsel claim that the defense never tried to negotiate a plea, which is often, if you get convicted in federal court, state court as well, and you say I relied on my lawyer, the lawyer didn't advise me as to the downside of going to trial and never tried to negotiate a plea bargain, that could get some traction with an appellate court when they're looking at the record.
So let's talk about the lawyers. So the prosecution now, we know, it just came out today, that they have 5 lawyers on the team, all of whom are 6?
6.
Now, the ones I know of 5, all women. Is the 6th a woman?
Yes.
Okay, so
yes.
6 women, all white. All white.
Correct. That's my understanding. I've only seen a couple of them, or know of a couple of them, but my understanding is you got a 6-pack of white women.
That's not coincidental.
It's very interesting to me. But when prosecutors try to get too cute, you referenced O.J. Simpson, sometimes it comes back and backfires on you.
How does this backfire? How could this backfire? Because I have an opinion about it, but what do you think?
Well, I can see it in both directions. I can say, here you have a situation where there is a prosecution. Obviously, Sean is Black. You've got 3 witnesses who are women or at least 5 women of presumably a majority of them of color. We know the name of one.
Cassie.
You have a situation, I'm assuming the others are not exclusively white. I don't want to paint too broad of a brush, but the most prominent of them is Cassie, who is already it's out there publicly and is not using a pseudonym. So you have that kind of racial image, but I'm not so sure that the defense is going to center so much on the race. That may be an undercurrent, as it always is. I'm the first to tell you that based on doing this, going into my 5th decade in the criminal justice system, that race underscores everything in the criminal justice system.
That's what Johnny Cochran said.
Yeah, well, Johnny was right. I mean, Johnny was people forget that Johnny, before OJ, was one of the most accomplished civil rights lawyers. You remember this because you were here in LA.
I covered
Johnny
it.
was not a criminal defense lawyer before OJ by reputation. He was a civil rights lawyer. He pursued 1983 actions and very successfully against the then LAPD, which was viewed in the community as a conquering, invading force.
For people who aren't lawyers, Mark, slow it down. 1983 is essentially police officers who brutalize people under the color of law. I mean, that's kind of what we're talking about. But back to this.
Correct.
So,
by the way, don't underestimate the audience here. I read the comments on occasion.
I get it, but not everybody. I know, just, come on. So the way I was looking at this was that, look, they're all really accomplished lawyers. And Maureen Comey, who is James Comey's daughter, the former FBI director, I hear she is just a fierce prosecutor. She did Ghislaine Maxwell. She's a formidable force. So they're all top notch. But the way I kind of saw this was, on the one hand, women who are alleged victims might be more comfortable talking to women. And, it might be more effective, in examining them on the stand. It might connect more with the jury. But on the downside, that you don't want to make it look like you're prosecuting a cause, because some people may say, well, wait a minute, an individual is being prosecuted and we're not going to bring the individual down because of a cause. So it could work. It's sort of a double-edged sword, the way I see it.
It is. You mentioned Maureen Comey, and I don't know her, but I've talked to people who've tried cases against her. And I often will say the true test of a prosecutor, in my mind, as to whether they've got game or not, is not on their ability to do an opening, not even on their ability to cross-examine. I think the true test of a prosecutor is whether or not on the rebuttal argument of a closing, whether they've got game. And by all accounts, that is Maureen Comey's strong suit, is the rebuttal on the closing. So if I had to bet, I will bet that she may not do the opening, she may not do the first kind of argument in the closing, but she will do the rebuttal, because I'm told in the Maxwell case that she was just devastating. And personally, I remember a case that I tried, 25 years ago, with a lawyer who I subsequently became very friendly with. And I think he would agree with me. I didn't think he was, distinguished himself during the trial, but he gave a rebuttal argument that I sat there and listened to. And by the way, if you're a defense lawyer, listening to the rebuttal argument is one of the hardest things you ever have to do, is just listen to somebody kick you and your client's ass all around the courtroom. That guy did a job that I can't remember a better rebuttal by a prosecutor. And I knew right then and there that any chance I had evaporated because of the way that he did the rebuttal argument. That's really what separates the premier prosecutor from somebody who's just running through the motions.
So on the defense side, our recon, which I know is good on this, I don't know, maybe 2-3 weeks ago, they were on the hunt for a female black lawyer, and they really, really wanted to get a female black lawyer. I think for kind of obvious reasons. They don't have that, and the trial starts Monday. What happened?
I'm not so sure. I mean, as we take this,
I'm so sure.
I don't know that you're right. I would have your staff check Pacer.
I don't need my staff to. This was a me thing.
Okay, well, I'm telling you, I'm not so sure that you're right. I'll leave it at that.
I know
I'm not gonna speak out of school, but I've heard very strong rumors.
Okay. Okay.
I'll leave it at that. But I want to go back to one thing. As you've got a pretty good sources virtually. In fact, you surprise me sometimes with some of the stuff you seem to know or the information that you get. Do you still think that, because there is this public perception, that there are celebrity sex tapes involved in this case?
No.
Do you still think that there are minors involved in this case?
I'm certain no.
Okay.
And again, when you say this case, we're talking the criminal case.
The criminal case,
in the
correct.
criminal,
I know that.
in the criminal case, in the criminal case, no.
And does that, isn't that, to my mind, that's one of the bigger hurdles in selecting a jury this coming week, is that there is, at least anecdotally, and when I talk to people, they have that opinion, strongly held opinion, that there's celebrity sex tapes, that they've kind of conflated Epstein, and you mentioned Ghislaine Maxwell and all of these things into Diddy. There's this idea that somehow this is Epstein redux or something. Do you get that?
I know that's true, but I completely disagree with the insinuation that that's an obstacle for the defense. I think it's a huge opportunity for the defense, because what happens is, if people go into a trial believing the firepower on the prosecution is so strong, I mean, let's say on a scale of 1 to 100, it's a 95, that it's so strong, but it goes down to an 88, that helps the defense, because everybody goes in thinking, wow, they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and they're going to prove this, and all of a sudden, none of it's there. I think that actually helps the defense, because people's expectations aren't met.
Well, I would agree with you if that is post-jury selection. The problem, I think, is that if you have people who say, I can't be fair, I can't give this guy the presumption of innocence because of everything I've heard, and the universe of everything they've heard includes this idea that there's celebrity sex tapes and these kind of powerful people that are pulling the strings, or there's minors involved, and that has so colored my judgment that I can't be fair, then you've lost a whole segment.
You've won them. No, in a way, you've won them, because you want people who say, I can't be fair because I know there are celebrity sex tapes and there are minors and there's this and that. You want those people because they think that's what it's about. And then all of a sudden, when they hear it's not, those are the people more likely to change their minds than those who have an opinion who never thought of that.
And I would agree with you if there was attorney voir dire. If somebody says, I can't be fair, and the attorney saying, well, why is that? Not just asking, can you follow the law, but saying, what is it? And they say, well, I've heard about minors and I can never be. And I've said, what if I told you to assume that there are no minors here, that you're never going to hear any evidence about minors? What about then? What about if I told you there are no celebrities, this was all consensual activity with girlfriends? What about then? Could you be fair? I get that if you could do attorney voir dire. What scares me if I'm on the defense team is if the judge is doing it, there's no knock on the judge. He doesn't know or hasn't done and it's not his bailiwick to have done all of the research going into it as to what colors people's perceptions. People have, I think you would agree with this, somebody's got a completely different view on consensual sex in the privacy of your hotel room, as opposed to even if it were consensual sex with minors, which can never be consent because you've got a minor, or if it was a celebrity and the perception is you're trying to suppress that.
Right. Is this just Judge voir dire?
Yes, that's my understanding.
So lawyers can't participate at all?
They participate in the sense that there's a give and take, and the judges talked about that on the record. But it's not going to be and this is one of the things I generally fight for in my cases, is I want attorney voir dire, even if it's for a limited number of minutes, so that I can engage. And the argument against it, if you will, that prosecutors always say is, no, you're just trying to shape the opinion. You're trying to get them to prejudge. I'm not trying to do that. Jury selection, the big misnomer about jury selection, it's not that you're trying to select, you're trying to deselect. You're
Right.
trying to get rid of people who have an agenda or stealth.
So, in terms of a case that's a candidate for jury sequestration, this feels like one, but God, on top of all of the other things, finding jurors who would agree to that seems almost impossible. But is it something that the defense would want? I mean, at least even in theory, to make sure they're not getting, information from the media, because it's going to be almost unavoidable.
The defense, if they know what they're doing, should always want sequestration, because you're going to have so much, especially in a case where there's no cameras in the courtroom. If you have no cameras in the courtroom and no sequestration, what ends up happening is you get second and third hand accounts as to what's happening in the courtroom. It depends on where you are. That gets into the ether, and that affects the jurors. I remember, and by the way, to your point about the jurors not wanting it, I remember picking a jury in one case, and one of the jurors was an older man back at the time, probably my age now, who raised his hand and said, "Is this jury going to be sequestered?" And the judge said, "Oh, no, don't worry about that." And he goes, "Actually, I was hoping it would be." He wanted to
Get away from it.
He busted
That's
up the courtroom.
hysterical. That is hysterical. That's really funny. Oh, God.
Well,
Well, okay. I haven't read anything in any of the filings so far that anybody's asking for. Do you think the defense is going to ask for that next week?
I don't know, and I haven't read. Like you, I haven't read it. If I were the defense, I would. I just don't think anytime, you have a case going on right now where Alan Jackson, who's a friend, in full disclosure, is trying Karen Reed
Yeah.
in there. Now, that case, I wouldn't feel that strongly about sequestration
Because it's being televised.
It's being televised. You can see what's happening. When it's being televised, the need for sequestration, I think, is diminished because it's not being filtered. When I often have said, Scott Peterson, the biggest mistake I ever made was kind of rolling over and not letting it be televised, because you had the filter of people who were not in the courtroom reading stuff or hearing stuff, and then it got into the ether, so to speak.
So what do you think? This is fascinating. Do you think they'll ask for that?
No, I don't. I think that's too late, because
why? Well, then why wouldn't
gonna...
they? Because what you're saying makes a lot of sense. And look, the public sentiment is against Diddy. So, given the landscape and given social media especially, why wouldn't they?
Well, I think that what the time to ask for it is, if you get into the jury selection this coming week, and it turns out that you really can't get a fair jury, that you've got that problem. The judge then has tools in his toolbox to use, one of which is change of venue. Well, that's not going to help. Where are you going to send it? It's not going to go anywhere.
Right.
I mean, I remember a judge just telling me, "Mr. Geragos, where do you want me to send this case? Into a space capsule to orbit the Earth?" So that's not going to work. Another is a continuance. Well, you have to get the defendant to agree to that, and that's not likely, especially when you've gone through all this effort. If you get to the point where the judge is at least himself questioning whether or not the defendant can get a fair trial, then I would say at that point, the defense probably should say,
I don't understand
Judge,
that. I don't understand that, because, I mean, the horse is out of the barn. We know what the publicity is. I mean, they've seen this for a year now. So everybody knows the level of publicity in this case. So the judge isn't going to be surprised. The judge knows exactly what's going on right now already.
Well, except the problem is, under the law, almost all of that calculus by a judge is done. The default is wait till jury selection, that we can ferret this out. We can remedy it in jury selection. And so you're always going to have that fallback. So I'm saying if you get to jury selection and it still is kind of a crazy prejudgment rate, that's when you would ask or suggest, Judge, all of your other tools are useless here. You've got to take the option of sequestration, which then brings up the other issue: is then do you lose people because they don't?
Of course you do. Of course you do. At a 2-month trial during the summer.
Yeah.
Of course you do. Right.
Unless you've got the old man who raises his hand.
Unless you got the old man, and I'm not sure. Well, maybe you do want the old man.
Yeah. Exactly.
So finally, a lot of people think this is silly, and I don't at all. So the judge ruled this week that Diddy could wear street clothes in court. And, a lot of people say, well, not a big deal. Well, obviously, if he came in jail issue, that basically says guilty. And, I think it even could be grounds. It could be reversible error, I think, to some extent, because it really is, it really paints a picture going in. So, we've seen it with O.J. Simpson. We've seen it with the Menendez brothers. We've seen it with everybody. Scott Peterson, they wear street clothes. That's important, obviously. And, what Leslie Abramson did in the first Menendez trial, putting them in sweaters, I thought was brilliant. I thought it was brilliant because you're trying to cast them against the charge. And she did it really effectively. And I know it sounds silly. Those sweaters worked. I mean, it really worked for a jury to juxtapose looking at these two guys against the crime that they committed. It was hard to reconcile. So it's important. In this case, and I know this is going to sound crazy to you and you're going to laugh at me, but I think what he wears is important because the defense is arguing here that Diddy led a swingers lifestyle, not a criminal lifestyle. And if you put him in a cardigan sweater like the Brady Bunch, it doesn't work. I mean, you're not looking at a guy or in a Brooks Brothers suit even. You're not looking at a guy where you're thinking swinger. And this is a case where you want the jury to think swinger. And so, do you wear a shiny suit? Do you even wear a chain? If you can. But right. I know that sounds crazy. And my office laughed at me on this, and I will admit it. But you're trying to sell a swinger story, and I don't think you do it in a Brooks Brothers suit.
Well, by the way, this is one of the conundrums of this case. One of the things that just perplexes me about it is the people have said, oh, he's going to lean into the swingers and that's a bridge too far.
Well, like Nivolo said that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't think it is. In fact, by the way, I mean, he had a contract with Diageo, which is the spirits maker, which was worth, upwards of $1 billion. And it actively promoted his lifestyle, his kind of Brat Pack 2.0 Diddy lifestyle, which was a swinging nightlife, party all night lifestyle. So it's amazing to me that we've now taken that, and mind you, you and I are old enough to remember what an iconic figure Diddy was in the 90s going into the 2000s. And now they've tried to almost have this rewriting of history, if you will, to say, no, that kind of party lifestyle was really this RICO action. Well, 20 years, 30 years later, that might be a nice way to reframe it. But how do you bring a criminal case based on that?
Yeah.
And to your answer, I've got two minds about this in terms of the clothing. Yes, every case, whether it's high profile or not high profile, the defense lawyer asks for, anytime you've got a jury, for street clothes. And that is de rigueur. It is almost always granted. This case, I can see an argument against it, which we'll wait and we'll talk about next week or next Thursday if you have me in.
An argument to have him wear jail issue?
Correct. We'll see if any of the
I got it. No. I think I don't want to wait.
Yeah.
Can I take a guess?
Yes.
I'm taking a guess because in one of the Diddy docs, I interviewed Mark Agnifilo. And what he said to me was that in his view and what he's going to try to sell to the jury is this is an attempted takedown of a successful black man. And if you show him in those circumstances, it might actually underscore what Agnifilo is trying to sell, as opposed to looking at him like he's not in any distress.
I think there is that. I can think of another argument, but I'll save it for next week.
Okay. How long is jury selection going to last, do you think?
I'm guessing that because if you reverse engineer that opening statements are a week from Monday, that I think you'll have a jury by Thursday. If in fact people don't start, you can metastasize. I've seen this. And one of the reasons I think a very smart decision by the judge was to do what they call individualized jury selection. We used to call it here in California, hovedvordire, which we used to have in capital cases. But by doing it individually, you don't get one of those situations where somebody says, I've got this excuse, I got that excuse, and then it metastasizes and the whole panel comes up with the excuse in order to get off. If he gets enough people so that you've got enough strikes left, which means roughly 40, then you could have a jury by Wednesday evening.
And opening statements are
The
Monday.
following Monday.
Monday. Is Cassie the first prosecution witness?
I can't imagine that she wouldn't be, but who knows? See, Maureen Comey, as we've said, is very clever, so we'll see.
Is your daughter cluing you in at all on what the defense is doing?
Well, she's been very, very tight-lipped. I'm trying to
You raise her, you put her through college, and you get nothing.
I put her through college, and I not only get nothing, I get a lot of pushback.
Okay, Mark. We will talk next week, okay?
Thanks, Harvey. Good to see you.
Good seeing you.